again then guys, and welcome to another complete overview and breakdown of the latest update, just like we did for the last one on GT Sport. And this one is kind of strange to me because straight off the bat, the number doesn't match the last update, at least here in the UK, because all of the stuff that I was leading up to this video with was of course for 1.22, but now they're calling it the 1.23 update. Now I did hear from a couple of people that apparently in some places we were already on 1.22. That doesn't really make much sense to me because we were definitely on 1.21 before. That's why I was making that a thing. But whatever, they've jumped to 1.23 for whatever reason. Maybe it's because of those other places. But I do believe that straight off of the bat, this is going to be perhaps the most controversial update that we've had so far. And not just because there are maybe cars that people didn't want, or no cars that people did want, or a weird track or anything like that. More so because there are a few little nagging details about this track which are just a little bit strange. Now the first one is definitely going to be a controversial one, maybe even the most controversial thing about it. And there are three things in particular which I think might get people's back up a little bit. Now the first one is microtransactions. We now have that in the game. You can straight up buy cars with real money, roughly like $1 for a car. I haven't checked them all to see if it varies, but I should think it probably does. I don't know. It's not like I'm going to ever use that anyway, and doubtless many of you won't either. Now they're saying, and it's understandable logic, that that is to allow people who don't have the time to grind, and of course using the tunes that I put out on the channel to earn like 2 million credits an hour, people don't have that kind of time. That is true, but is the answer to that asking for real money, or is the answer to give us better races? I would say it's the latter, but obviously making extra real-world money is more of an incentive for a big business. So that's unfortunate. It is a shame that we've taken a step back as far as bringing microtransactions into the game rather than taking them out, kind of ironically, which is exactly what Forza 7 is currently doing. They're taking the loot crates out of the game as Gran Turismo Sport is bringing stuff in. Kind of strange. I wish they weren't doing that, but that's the first thing. The second thing is a strange one about the F1 car. Of course, the the Mercedes W08, which is an awesome car. We're going to do a full breakdown and review of all of the vehicles in the coming days and weeks. I'm going to be doing tunes for them, probably some rivals matches, so of course stick around on the channel for all of that. But I am going to give my quick thoughts on a couple of the cars, and the Mercedes is an interesting one because I'm not talking about the way it performs. I'm actually talking about a very strange, but then once you think about it, understandable thing regarding liveries. Because there are actually not 7 cars in this pack. There are 8, because there are 2 versions of the F1 car, one in the actual Mercedes livery, and the other, which is basically, it would appear to be a paintable one, but it's not. It comes with preset colours like silver, black, red, yellow, etc. Now, when you click to buy those cars, as you could see in this video, it gives you a little yellow notice saying that the livery cannot be changed. That's very strange because it's literally the only car in the game that we've got that with. Now initially I was very annoyed by that because of course we all want to do a ton of different liveries, different teams, real ones, fictional ones, include it maybe even in the livery competition here on the channel every Sunday, but we can't. You literally cannot paint the car, and regardless of which one of the two you choose, I chose the coloured one to see if I could change it, you cannot change the colour. That is very strange. But the reason why I said it makes sense once you think about it is because of course you can't change the colour. It makes all the sense in the world from a marketing point of view because it's Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes. Mercedes would hardly want people slapping Red Bull livery on their car. Now of course you could say that about a number of race cars, but it's kind of a different scenario. Formula One being as famous, as followed, and arguably as important as it is to many people, certainly to many manufacturers, it is understandable that they don't want people, in effect, putting other brands onto their cars. I can imagine Rolls-Royce doing something like that as well, and not wanting their cars to be able to be made to look like a Bentley or something like that instead. Those companies can be very particular about that kind of thing. Unfortunately, that affects us as the players because it completely destroys any creativity that we were hoping to have. Now, of course, it's not all lost, because we can still use the Senna Lotus rip-off to do our liveries on, the F1500, but it is a shame. It is a big shame, let's be honest, that we can't do that, although, as I said, from a marketing standpoint, it is understandable. Now, the third thing that I think is going to be controversial, unfortunately, is going to disappoint some of you, perhaps a lot more than the other two things that I've mentioned. And of course, you heard at the start of the video, as a couple of people requested, that I include some sound of the Mazda, because of course many people were looking forward to that more than anything else. It's an icon of the franchise since GT3, and for good reason. It's arguably the coolest car from Japan to ever win Le Mans, now that it's not the only car, of course, but it's underwhelming. I'm sorry to say, and of course we're going to go into it more in the review itself, but I'm not impressed with the Mazda 787B. It does not feel good, and it does not sound good. The sound, in fact, is the weirdest that it's ever been. It does not at all, and the sound, although loud, it's not as screaming as it used to be, or as it should be. If you listen to actual videos of 787Bs starting up, just idling at a idle or driving at high speed, it does not sound like it does in the game. And that's not the first time that Group C cars have been, as many would feel, incorrectly shown or incorrectly sounded in the game. The Mercedes, for instance, the Sauber C9, a lot of people don't like the sound of that one. Now, of course, it could seem like there's always something to complain about, but I would have thought, given the Mazda 787B's status in the franchise, in the world, in the community, and how possessive people are about that distinctive sound, you would kind of think that Polyphony would get that right. That's very strange to me, because it doesn't sound like one at all. It sounds more like a VTEC, to be honest, a really loud VTEC with a cut-off muffler. And that's not right for a 787B. It does not warble or grumble or rumble, whatever you want to refer to it as, that traditional trademark rotary sound. It doesn't do that at all. And that is a real big shame. But it's not just the sound. The steering is unusually heavy. There is a lot of understeer on the 787B. I've tried it out with multiple different diff settings, and even so you can see from the lap that it's okay. It can do around a 3-minute lap. That was my first full lap with the car. Top speed's pretty good, over 250, but it wasn't particularly impressive. In fact, I found it to be slower than all of my other Group Cs, the Nissan, the Mercedes, the Jag. So I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed with the Mazda, quite honestly. The redeeming things about the pack are, for instance, that the F1 car only costs 2 million credits. A lot of people were asking me, how much is it going to cost? Is it going to be 20 million like the Ferrari is, which I can confirm. Yes, indeed, of course, it is 20 million. But I said that it could be one extreme or the other, because if it turned out to be the actual Mercedes, they could make the price really high, whereas if it was like a Formula GT rip-off of it, as we've had before, then it could be super cheap, like the prototypes have become, like $1 million each. I thought either way it would be one extreme or the other. It did turn out to be the lower of the two. It's 2 million, so it's pretty reasonable. I would recommend choosing carefully, because it's kind of pointless to buy both. So whether you want the Mercedes livery or the colour, of course that's down to you. I chose yellow, but I might end up buying both, because I think I'd rather have the full livery if I have the option of the two. As far as the rest of the pack, I have to say, and I did not expect this, the Ford is my favourite car of the pack in terms of how it sounds and how it drives. It feels great. It feels fantastic. In fact, it's easily one of my favourite handling Group 3 cars. It is indeed in Group 3, as I predicted it would be. And of course, as far as predictions go, I was here or there on the pack. I got some correct, some not. Of course, most of the cars that I said were going to be what they were did turn out to be the case. We all know the joke of the Ferrari F10 at this point. Of course it's not. And the Ford I was off with, because as many of you know, I don't adjust the images that they give us. I know some people like to raise the contrast or raise the lighting to see if you can see wings and intakes. I never do any of that. I just look at the picture and go with my gut, be it right or wrong. So the fact that I couldn't see a wing on the Ford made me think that it was the Gulf liveried LM. Of course it's not, it's the Spec 2, but not the white and black icon from Gran Turismo 4, it's the test car that came along in Gran Turismo 5, the full carbon. You can paint it, it looks great, it sounds fantastic, it rumbles like a Ford should, and as I said, the handling really took me by surprise. It's so smooth, it's controlled, it feels fantastic, it sounds fantastic. So definitely try out the Ford. It's only 450,000. I haven't gotten into the K cars yet, but you can pretty much predict what they're going to be like. Thumpy, whizzy, great through low-speed corners, and they're cheap. They're dirt cheap. But as I said, I'll leave some of that info for the individual breakdowns, reviews, and tunes, etc, etc. So overall, we've got some interesting new stuff. Of course, we have new scapes, which you could see in the video. I will say that the majority of the cars in the pack are quite reasonably priced, except for the Ferrari, obviously, and the helmet livery editor, various other things. Some is good, some is not so good. I think the most disappointing for me, or the most disappointing thing for me, is the lack of livery on the Mercedes. That's strange. It's kind of a shock after being able to do it to everything else, whereas if this was like Gran Turismo 4, we'd think nothing of it, because you couldn't do that with any of the cars back then. So, you know, I'm appreciative for what we've got, but I do definitely foresee this being quite a controversial pack for maybe not all players, but definitely some. If you're a Mazda 787B fan, if you're hoping to make Red Bull liveries on your F1 car, and also if you are not a fan, as I'm not, of microtransactions, well, it's an interesting pack. And finally, just my brief thoughts on the new circuit in France. I'm not going to try and butcher the name, but it's an interesting circuit. There's a number of different layouts for it, and it goes over 6 miles in its ultimate variation, which is an interesting length. I was hoping for something more like Circuit Sierra, for instance, but oh well. It's an interesting track. It reminds me actually of a combination of the Red Bull Ring, which was added to Gran Turismo 6, or the Oostenrijkring, however you pronounce it. Probably nothing like that. And it actually reminds me of a combination of that, the Red Bull Ring, and some of the Drive Club tracks. It has a very Drive Club feel to it, with the trees, the countryside, the mountains. It's an interesting circuit. I think it's a fairly nice one. There are some 90-degree turns, some decent-sized straights, some flowing corners, but I don't foresee it being one of my favourites, at least not for the moment. So overall, it's an interesting pack. Some of the things I really like the suit editors, the Ford turned out really well. It's still cool to have the Mazda in the game. As far as the Formula 1 car, you'll have to stick around on the channel for my review of its performance and its handling, but suffice it to say, that's the overview of the tracks, the cars, the new features, and of course, as I said, stick around on this channel for more info in coming days. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.